what did we learn yesterday?
That JavaScript is doable.
That's a good win. It's definitely an optimistic approach.
How to
What
use
else?
the package, prompts package.
Yep, and we're going to touch on that again tonight with a tip calculator, just to get you a little bit more exposure to prompts and using that in Node. What else did we learn?
We learned about the try catch for checking for errors.
Yep, try catch, and sometimes it's unavoidable that the computer is going to hit an error. So telling it, hey, that's okay. I'm going to catch that error before the user sees it and maybe put out a different message.
Display something else. Yeah.
Yep. What about loops? What kind of loops did we learn about yesterday?
For
While.
For and while. And what are the two different kinds of for loops?
for items in, was that it?
Yep. And then the traditional kind of the let I equal whatever and indexing your way through it. And then the last thing we touched on was functions. Why do we use functions?
Algebra.
Not quite.
Be able to repeat certain blocks of code.
Exactly. Yep. Being able to write the code once and reuse it in multiple places. And that is the concept of DRY, dry coding, which is don't repeat yourself. So having your code be dry code means that you're not repeating yourself and that you're organizing your code in such a way that it makes it easier to understand it and read it and reuse parts of it. Okay, so what we are doing tonight is we are diving all into concepts. So we're not actually doing anything new concepts tonight, other than a little bit of working in JavaScript in the browser. So we're going to build a tip calculator first in the terminal. And we're going to use the prompts package like we used yesterday. We're going to start from scratch on that, build out a whole tip calculator. From there, we are going to rebuild that tip calculator, but build it in the browser. So this is the first time that you actually get to see, hey, I can make some HTML and I can write some JavaScript and the two can talk to each other and actually output something into my HTML page. And then we've got an exercise on nested data, on working with for loops, trying to get access to specific pieces of data and practicing nesting down into our code. The last free code camp homework assignment is for loops and using recursion. We will be touching on recursion next week and finishing up the rest of the JavaScript concepts, which are kind of the more advanced beginner concepts of JavaScript. And then we will go from there. So again, tonight is all project-based learning. The tip calculator is hopefully not going to be anything new. The tip calculator in the browser, we are going to talk a little bit about the DOM, the document object model. And that is basically the bridge between JavaScript and HTML. To be more technical or more specific, it's actually the model that is used by JavaScript to translate our HTML into an object. And then we can work with that object in JavaScript and it will automatically translate it back to our HTML and update it on our screen. So we have a couple terms there, get element by ID in our HTML. But Karen, as we are going along, if you hear me using any terms, if you could just throw them in this list and take a stab at the definition. I think that there are a lot of terms that I use as I go. As I was reviewing all of these topics for tonight, I'm like, this just isn't a good night for slides. But with that said, I did link to all of the final code that we will be using. So if you pop open any of these, this is the code, the full program that we are going to do first. So if you're like trying to code along and you're like, wait, where is he? You can always go back and reference this code. But we're going to build this out kind of step by step and go from there. Any questions before we dive in there?
No, I just wanted to say that The way that you explained it yesterday towards the end of the night, if you could explain it kind of like that when you do go through, I think that would be very helpful for me.
Yeah, I will definitely try and hit that like as we hit these different touch points, but a reminder on that is definitely appreciated. If you're getting to the point where you're like, whoa, he's moving on to the next thing and I need him to explain that one again, feel free to interrupt me and jump in and we'll definitely do that.
Okay, we'll
Max, you
do.
said the is that in the outline, that other code that you just had up?
This code that I currently have up,
No, the one that you just had up before. You
This one?
said if we wanted to go back and, yeah.
yes, that is in the agenda under tip calculator for week 7, day 4. That's
Okay, thank you.
Yep, that's this first link right here. And then the browser one is what we're going to do probably after the break. Okay, so this is, I'm trying to think about whether we are going to do this for homework or not. I believe what I'm going to do is say that the tip calculator terminal version is not for homework, but the tip calculator browser version is. So if you would like to use the terminal one to kind of just go along for the ride and not do it yourself, and then when we get into the browser version, try and follow along. We're going to use a lot of those same concepts in the terminal version when we rebuild it in the browser. So that's going to be my official recommendation, is just go along for the ride for the terminal version. Stop me and interrupt me if you don't understand what the code is doing. And then we'll go just a little bit slower on the browser version of it, just because there are new concepts there. And hopefully that will give you a chance to code along with it. Sound good for everyone? Cool. All right, so I'm going to dive in. I'm going to create, I'm going to go file, open folder. I'm going to go to my week 7 and create a day 4 folder. And I'm going to hit open. And I'm going to create a new file and I'm going to call it tip-terminal.js. I'm going to right click on it and open it in integrated finder. I'm sorry, an integrated terminal. And then down here, we are going to need our prompts package again. So I'm going to do my npm install prompts. And that's going to make the node modules appear in the package.json and all of that fun stuff. Well, now I need to use my prompts package, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say const prompts equals require prompts. And all this is doing is it's saying, okay, const means we're not going to change this package at all, right? It's a constant. Prompts is just the name of the variable that we're storing it in. And then we're going to say equal, so the computer knows, hey, I need to execute the other part of this code and store it into my prompts variable. Require is a reserved word, meaning it's a word built into the programming language. So it knows require means go use something in HPM. And then we put prompts in a string because we're saying prompts is the name of that NPM package we want to pull in. Now, again, we're not going to tackle asynchronous code tonight, but prompts does require async. So we're going to do this really nasty little syntax here to make it so we can get access to the await keyword. So we're going to dive in here. We're just going to start with a console log test to make sure our code is running. I'm going to go back down to my terminal. I'm going to do my node tip terminal.js. I get my test running and we're done and we're good to go. So what are the 2 things that we need for a tip calculator?
A number, 2 numbers.
2 numbers. What are those 2 numbers?
The price of the item and then the tax rate or the tip rate.
Yep. And so we're going to call that total and tip. So we're going to say, hey, we're going to store the answers to these questions. And we need to use the prompts package to do that. So we're going to put in our parentheses here because we want to execute the prompts, right? We want to tell prompts to do things. But in order for the prompts to know what it's asking us to do of that package, it needs some information. Now, before what we did is we passed in an object here and we started saying, hey, we need the name and the type and all of that stuff. But the prompts package is kind of interesting in that the first parameter can be an object if you're just asking one question, or if you want to ask multiple questions, you can pass it in as an array, right? We can't really have multiple objects unless we put it in a list so it knows, oh, there are multiple questions you're trying to ask here. So instead of using our curly braces right off the bat, we're going to use our square braces. And what that's telling our JavaScript is we're not just passing in an object, we're passing in an array, and that array is going to happen to have an object in it as the first thing in the array. And then we're going to use our documentation of we need the total. We need to tell it the type is going to be a number. And then the message that we're going to show to the user is going to say, what was the total bill? Now, we don't want to go too far, so I'm just going to save that, come down in the terminal, run it, and it says, what is the total of the bill? And I'm going to type in $15 and hit enter, and it's just done. But that's not quite enough for me. I want to make sure that the answer is going into my object the way I think it is, so I can confirm that that output is correct. So I'm going to come down, I'm going to console log out my answers. I'm going to rerun it. I'm going to type in a number and I get total : 15. Great. We're on the right track, but we already identified we need another thing. We need to ask another question. Well, where is that other question going to go? It needs to be inside this array because it's another question that we're asking prompts to do, but not inside this object because the next question has its own type and name and message associated with it. So we're going to come down here, we put a comma, and that comma is telling the array, hey, there's another item coming in the array. This is the second item now in the list. And what we're going to do is we're going to say the name on that is going to be the tip. The type is going to be still a number. And the message is going to say how much you tip in. So I'm going to run my terminal again. I'm going to console log. I'm going to say my total for the bill is 15. I'm going to tip 20%. And what I get is total 15, tip 20. But that's in an object, right? And we know it's in an object because these are the curly braces telling us curly braces almost always mean object whenever you see that console logged out. So that means that I should be able to do my answers dot total, and I should also be able to do my answers dot tip. And I'm using that dot notation because we want to access the total, and that's going to give us 15 and the tip of 20. So I save, I rerun it, I say 15, and I say 20, and I get my numbers coming out there. So because we know we have access to that, we can start calculating our tip amount, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, your tip should, oops, I'm going to put it in a string and say your tip should be, and then I'm going to add a plus, and I'm going to start to figure out how much the tip amount should be. So the tip amount should be the total times the tip. So we're going to save that. We're going to come in here and run it. And it's going to say, what's the total bill? And we'll say 100, and we're tipping 20. So we should get $120, or the tip should be $20, right? We run it and we get total is not defined. Why is total not defined?
Out of scope.
Not that it's necessarily out of scope, but it is inside of our answers object. So we can't just say total. We have to tell it, hey, go look in the answers, and that's where you're going to find the total. Same here for the tip.
So you don't have to do like a console log separately for the total, or no?
Nope.
Like a const, or no?
we could say const total equals answers dot total, and then we could take it out here and that would work fine.
Okay.
Right? So we can pull it out of the object, or when we want to reference it, we can just go right into the object and get it out from there.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm going to run that. Total is going to be 100. My tip's going to be 20%. And I get tip should be 20,000. Okay, maybe we don't want to do that. I did lie. I said we weren't going to do any more math, but we need just a tiny little bit more math. When we do a percentage, right, we're saying basically the tip is 20. So 20 times 100 is not giving us what we want, right? The tip is really a percent. And so in order to convert our 20 input into a percentage, we need to divide this tip by 100. And that's going to convert our 20% into 0.2. So now when we do 0.2 times 100, we're going to get our actual answer. So I rerun it. I say 100, I say 20, and now I get your tip should be $20. Okay, but it would be helpful if in addition to the tip, it printed out the total amount, right? So I'm going to add another plus here, and I'm going to say, and your total amount will be, and add a plus. And now I want to put my total amount in here. So I'm going to take my total and I want to add my tip. Well, if it were that easy, that would be fantastic. But we don't have our tip. Our tip is this math here. So we could copy this and paste it all the way over here. But now look at how messy our code is getting with doing all of that math. We're repeating ourselves and shouldn't be. So I'm going to take this whole thing, cut it out and say, hey, my tip amount is going to equal my total times my tip divided by 100. Now I can say my tip amount is going to go here. And for this down here, we just need to add our total plus our tip amount. So I'm going to run that code. I'm going to say 100. I'm going to say 20. And we get total is not defined because total still needs to come from our answers. We run it 120. Come on, 20. Your tip should be $20 and your total amount will be 120. So that's it. We build our tip calculator. Now we move into the testing phase. So we go, all right, let's rerun that. I'm going to run this and my total is going to be $100 or $110.50. Well, $110 and I hit my period doesn't show up and I hit 5. I'm like, okay, my bill definitely needs to support multiple input values, right? It needs to support not just whole numbers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my npm.js. And if it makes you feel any better, this is exactly what I did when I planned this lesson. I couldn't figure out why this wasn't working. And I thought, maybe it's something to do with the number type. Maybe I need to tell it where we need to allow it to take a decimal in here. So I went to my npm and I typed in prompts to find the package and I go to my prompts package. Okay, the README is going to decide not to load tonight. So I'm just going to go right to their homepage and get it from there. And now I'm in here and I'm seeing type, number, value, all of that stuff. But none of that's really helping me, right? That's just the basic intro. So what I'm going to do is I want to see what the types are. So I hit Command F and just typed in types. And the first thing that comes up is you can see the list of supported prompt types here. All right, so I'm going to click on that. And now here are all of the types that it supports. This toggle one seems pretty cool. Maybe we'll come back to that one. But what I want to look at is the number. I want more information about what this prompts package can do with numbers. So now it says, how old are you? Number, all of this information. And then it's got all of these properties down here. So I'm going to just scroll down a little bit. And what it's going to do is one of the property is float. A float is like a double. It's saying it's a decimal number, right? Float is another data type kind of synonymous with supporting a decimal. So I'm going to read it, and it's telling me Boolean. Boolean means that we can set float either to true or false. And then it's going to tell me allow floating point inputs defaults to false. Well, that's our problem right there, is it won't let us put in a decimal number because this defaults to false. So what I do is I come back over here, and I'm going to say up here, hey, the float should be true. It should let us type in a decimal number. So I come over, I hit Control-C to exit out of my running program. I rerun my node tip terminal, and it says, what's the total bill? Now I'm going to say $110.57. Okay. And how much am I tipping? 20%. Now I get your tip should be $22.11 and 4/10 cents. Okay. Well, now we've got a different problem. It let me type that in, but I need to round it off, right? So I'm going to go back to my docs, and my doc here has this lovely round. And it says round float numbers to 2 decimals, defaults to 2. So let me just confirm this is how I solved it. So I'm going to, I didn't actually solve it that way. So what I need to do is figure out how to round that off. So what I do is I come down here, and I'm going to say const round, because we want to round not only the tip amount, right? We want to fix this 22.114, but we also want to fix this 132.684. So because we need to round 2 different numbers, I'm saying in my head already, we need to reuse this code, so it's going to become a function. So our const round is just like any other. We have our equal telling the computer, hey, we're going to store something in there. These empty parentheses are saying, hey, what are the incoming parameters? What variables do we need to make this function run? So we need the input number. And then this equal arrow is saying, hey, a function is coming. The curly brace is saying that's the beginning of the function. And the ending curly brace is saying, and this is where the function ends. So what we're going to do is we are going to return, and we are going to have to do just a tiny bit of math here, because believe it or not, there is not a round function built into JavaScript that supports a certain number of decimal places. So what we end up doing is we say, hey, go ahead and round whatever the input is times 100, and then divide it by 100. So if we input this number, the 22.1114, when we times it by 100, we're moving the decimal place over by 2. So we're going to get 2,211. Then round it and cut off the remaining 0.4 that is left. Then divide by 100, which moves this decimal place back over 2 places to where it belongs. So if we take this and we surround this in our round, and we put this in our round and run it, I can do my 110.57 and my 20. And I get my 22.11 and my 132.68.
Max, why you have to do all of that if you have the prompts that has a round function?
Yeah, great question. So the problem is that if I inputted the if I said round 2, that's going to round off the input for the formula, but it's not going to round the output of the formula, which is where those extra decimal places are coming.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, I am going to pause here. How are we feeling about this other than ill math?
A lot ill math. No, but it's definitely I'm following you.
So do we understand kind of the syntax, why we've got quotes and curly braces and square braces and parentheses and all of that stuff? we understanding like the logical thinking, the order of the thinking of why we're doing things the way we are.
I gotta look at that divide and multiply thing again, but it'll sink in.
Yeah, I was gonna say, can you explain the that last part again about the math round input?
Yeah, sure.
Before you do that, I have a quick question. With the color, the color scheme, like you see how it like on your VS Code, like or like yesterday you were saying something about the arrays and like VS Code. Like, is there a way that I can like look up the code names, like the arrays on VS Code, just so I can understand like what you're actually typing out and how it's coding it?
You're basically saying like how you know a light blue is like an object key and then the dark blue is the object itself.
Yes, exactly.
So I use a theme, I think called Darkula, Dark Plus. And so I wonder if I look up VS Code Dark Plus and look into the GitHub. I mean, this is super technical, but basically what it's doing is it's telling it, like if it's a variable on a constant, it's going to be this color.
Interesting. So that's the code of the
theme itself.
Interesting. Okay.
And
I will work with that.
I'll share this link. It's super technical. But if you just do a search for like VS Code theme,
and whatever theme that I'm using, I can probably. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't have like a definitive list to be able to easily
like,
say.
You know how like when you hover over, in the code and like the element name or the arrays pop up, like is there a way that I can look at that list like of things that it's defining or is telling me what it is actually?
If you go to W3,
does VS Code have like terms?
If you go to W3 and you look up arrays, it'll show you like different function and everything that goes with arrays, so you can figure out different tools to use with them. I don't know if that's the same thing or not.
Yeah, so
yeah, I just want to be able to like read the definitions of them, and then that'll make more sense in my head. So like that's pretty much
yeah. So there's no. So here, let me take a step back. If you go to Free Code Camp, I'm not going to send you to a specific assignment, but this is something that Christy was pointing out, I think during yesterday's break or maybe at the end. If you go to the JavaScript section, what it says in this basic JavaScript is in this course, you'll learn fundamental programming concepts, and then they actually list them. Right, so they're saying data structures like numbers in strings, and then array, objects, functions, loops, and if-else statements. So that's the list that I would have in the back of my head to then use Larry's answer to go read more about that. Right, so if you find that like Free Code Camp, you do the homework, you get it done, and you're like, I still don't feel like I understand them. It's worth just copying the word array and typing in W3 schools, arrays, and then JavaScript. And that's going to take you to this page that's going to show you examples, and it's going to give you why use it and all of that stuff. And then it also gives you this very long list over on the left of like kind of all the basic JavaScript fundamentals.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you.
So hopefully that's helpful. We probably are not going to touch on all of these, but if you're looking for a reference of like, just give me a reminder of what a string is in JavaScript and how we use it, this is really good to go right into JS strings and see an example and see the different syntax around it.
Max, what about the ebook that was posted today? You think that have that in there as well?
Yeah, the other resource is we posted it in the CIC student C3 channel. Karen posted a list of these 6 books that she recommends for JavaScript. There is one, this Eloquent JavaScript, and I linked to it in the message here. This is a free ebook, or you can buy the actual book. And this is also like a different approach of understanding JavaScript. I mentioned it in my message. It's very polarizing. Some people get in here and they can't for the life of them figure out why I recommended this. And then there are other people who get in here and they are like, this is what I needed. I didn't understand a word Max was saying, but after I read this, it clicked and I got it. So I stopped short of recommending this, but I do put it out there as a resource because the way he explains it appeals to certain thinking, like logical thinkers, and truly wanting to understand why JavaScript is written the way it is written. So if you are interested in like another resource, if you're someone who learns better from reading than following along and just hearing it as I explain it, Eloquent JavaScript might be a good fit for you. I don't know, Karen, if you have any other comments on the books.
And that's free, right?
That ebook is free, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that one is free. The Learn JS, a smart JavaScript, a smarter way, or a smarter way to learn JavaScript. That actually has, like at the end of it, the chapters are super short. I mean, we're talking like 3 pages for each thing that he does. And at the end of each one, he gives you like a website where you can go to try out what he just talked about and explained. So that's one of the reasons that I like that book as well.
Okay, I am going to circle all the way back. Someone said, can you explain the math portion again? I think that was Zach, and I think we could all benefit from that. So what we're doing here is, unfortunately, JavaScript doesn't have a way to say round to 2 decimal places. It only has a way to round a decimal. It only has a way to round a decimal based off of whatever the last digit is, right? So what we do here is I'm going to actually comment this tip part out, and we're just going to work with the total. So I'm going to comment this out as well and the tip amount out, and I'm going to console.log whatever comes out of here. So I want to say math.round whatever is in my answers total. So I'm going to run the program. And if I say 100 dot 100 dot try that again, 100.51, it's going to return 101, because what it's doing is it's taking the 100.5 and just rounding it up. And it will do the same thing if I do 100.40, 100.41, it's going to round it down to 100. Well, that's great, but we don't want it to round to the nearest dollar, whole dollar. We want it to round to the nearest cent, right? But we can't easily do that. We only have a way to round that last decimal place. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our total and we're going to move our total over 2 decimal places. So we're going to say, hey, round it to this, to take the decimal and move it. So instead of 100.41, it's now going to be 10041. So we times that by 100. And so now when we run that code, if we say 100.419, oh, it's not going to let me do that. All right, we'll just hard code it. If I say 100.499, what that should round to is 1,000. I'm sorry, it should round to 100.50, right? So I'm going to run this. That doesn't matter anymore. So what it did is it rounded it right, but now we lost our decimal point because we moved it over 2 places. So the reverse is what we're going to do here. Where basically this times 100 is moving the decimal places over 2 spots, so that it does the rounding properly. and then we're going to reverse that decimal place movement and move it back over to where it was initially. So that's what the divide 100 is, right? Because whenever we times by 10, it moves the decimal point one place. When we do it by 100, it's moving it 2 places. So it's a little JavaScript trick to basically say, hey, move it over 2 places, do the round, and then move it back over to where it's supposed to be. So now when we run this, it's going to round it properly. And so that means that our round function is going to work the way we want, which is what we ended up doing down here. If you don't get that because it's too mathy, that is okay. You will learn JavaScript. You will survive through it. It's okay if that was just a little too much math. So I'm going to turn all of these back on because I believe this should be working the way we want it to. So my bill is 176.567, and we're tipping, I don't know, we'll say 45%, and we get our tip and our total amount. So one more thing that I would like to do here is I would like this to loop. I would like to say that I can keep entering totals and tips and have it keep going until I say I don't want to keep going. So I'm going to put another prompt in here that says loop answer. And I'm going to go to my prompt. And now I'm not going to pass in an array because it's only one question that I'm asking, right? And so my message is going to be the same or similar, saying, would you like to calculate another tip? And my name for that is going to be, name for that is going to be loop. And then the type, and now I run into a problem. It's a yes, no answer. I don't really know what the type is, right? It's not a number. It's not a string. I don't know what my options are there. So I'm going to go back to my documentation and I'm going to see the list of prompt types using my Command F again. So I'm going to click on that and it gives me all of these things here. And at first I went, oh, list would be a good thing. Let's look at a list of options. But then I saw this toggle and I thought, well, that's really what I want, right? I want a true or false. So do you want to keep going or do you not want to keep going? So when I click on that, it tells me all of these properties I can use. So I have to set the type as toggle. We already have our name and our message, but then it's saying, hey, what do you want to be active first? Do you want to make it so when they hit enter for the first time, it's going to loop them? Or do you want to make it so that when it's not active, it's going to be the other default value, right? So what we do is we come in here and we say our type is going to be toggle. And then we say the initial value we want it to go on is true. We basically want to say when you first load this, assume they would like to loop it again. We then are going to say active. And then the inactive message. And I'm not going to forget my comma up there. And then I just want to console log out my loop answer. So we run it. I type in my first number and my second number, and it says prompt is not defined because that should be prompts. Try that again. Okay, now it says, would you like to calculate another tip? And it's got the yes highlighted. And so, oh, I got caught. We have to tell it await. The prompts package always needs that await because you see what it's doing. It's not like waiting for me to answer the question and just console logged out. So let me try that again. 120. Okay, now it says, would you like to calculate another tip? And that, yeah, let's go again is selected. So if I hit enter, it says loop true. And if I run that again and select the other one with the left arrow key and hit enter, it says loop false. So what we are going to do is we're going to say let should run again equal true. And then we're going to say while should run again is equal to true. We're going to put in our curly braces and we're going to say all of this code should run again if they choose to run it again. But now we've got the problem of, while this loop is great and it's going to keep running, we haven't tied this variable that we just created to the loop answer that they're actually picking inside of the loop. So we're going to do our last step here, which is to say that our should run again is going to equal our loop answer dot loop. So you can go through that again. We're using the prompts package. Prompts package always makes us use a wait because we need to wait for the user to put in an input before we keep running other code. Our message and our name are pretty much the same as our others. Now we're using this type toggle. So we can toggle whether or not we're going to keep running the loop or stop running the loop. We come in here and we see all the different properties that we have access to, right? And what we do is we say the initial value should be the true value, saying they do want to run over that loop again. The active message that's going to be their first choice is going to say, yes, let's go again. And then the inactive part of the toggle, the other answer on the toggle, is going to be this string right here. Then what we do is, based off of whatever their answer is, we look at the name of the answer, which is the loop, and that's going to either be the true, they do want to loop it again, or the false. So we store that and should run it again. Then we come back up to the top here and put all of our code in this while loop. And the while loop is looking for when should it keep going. And when it should keep going is what's in these parentheses. So what we're basically doing is we're saying should run again. While that is true, keep running the code. Otherwise, exit out of it. We're done with it, which means it's going to come down here. So I'm just going to put in my one final console log that says, thanks for calculating tips with me today. We run our code. We're going to say 100. We're going to say 20. And it says your tip should be $20. Your total amount should be 120. And it says, would you like to calculate another tip? So I'm going to hit enter. I'm just going to say, all right, calculate another one. We'll do 50 and 10. Says your tip should be calculated out. Great. Now we're done. So we're going to hit the left arrow key. It says, no, I'm done calculating. And then we get our thanks for calculating tips with me today. And it finishes running the program.
Max, when you created the while loop, did you have to put equals true there? Because did you have to do that? Or like if I want to be lazy, can I just put should run again since it's a Boolean?
Yeah, that's shorthand, and that's how I would code it out. Because basically this is always going to evaluate down to a true or false value. So the computer assumes that if you don't do the equals true, that you're looking for a true or false value. So that is shorthand, and that's how I would write it. But it's often easier to understand what the loop is evaluating with that extra bit in there. So I add that just for beginners, but you're totally right, Larry, that you could remove this part of the code and it would work fine.
Thank you.
Okay, that was a lot, but how are we feeling about it? Feeling like it's a good recap? We're feeling like we understand it. I'm going to put this code in the live stream channel. Promise there's no more math for the rest of the night. Any of the math that we're going to do, we're going to be doing from the math we've already figured out in this tip calculator.
I do want to say something about the math. The chances of you using it in a job are probably slim unless you're working for like a financial institution or a company that deals with a lot of financials. So don't freak out too much about the math, because you probably won't see too much of it unless you're doing something in like that field.
It's surprisingly hard to come up with intro to JS projects that do not have a little bit of math in them, right? Because it's like, all right, what are we using our JavaScript for? And most of the JavaScript, we're using it to be interactive, right? So like what's really interactive that isn't math-based? And that math.round is the only one that really gets you. But it's good to start working with JavaScript and start thinking through, well, how can I combine different pieces of this, right? How can I combine my variable and my math operations and my Booleans and my loops to really make something that is functional and usable? Okay, so we are going to keep rolling here. We're going to just rebuild this whole thing over again, but now we're going to do it in the browser. And you guys are going to lead me through what those steps are. But before we do that, we have to build an interface. So remember how I keep saying this always builds on itself? Well, we need to go back to our HTML so that we can apply our JavaScript in our HTML. So it's going to be a blast from the past here. We're going to create a new file. Now, this is what I encourage you to code along with because this will be a homework assignment. So Christy's like, oh, crap. I'm ready now. I'm paying attention. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a file called index.html. I am going to start a live share so you guys can code along and see what I'm working with. Although the final version of this code is already in the outline. But I will dump this into the live stream in case you would like to join me. And I am going to do my, go away. I'm going to do my exclamation mark enter to get all of my HTML in here. And now if you wanted to use Bootstrap in here and get some styling in, that's fine. We're not going to spend any time on the styling tonight. It's going to be super ugly, but we are going to get it functional. So we already identified we need two different numbers, right? We need the total amount and we need the tip amount. How are we going to make a user interface that allows the user to put in the total amount? What's the
you can make a form, some paragraph inputs.
Yep. Yeah, the input is what we need. So we're going to start with a label, right? And that label is going to say total amount. And then we need to pair that up with an input. And that input is going to have a type, and that type is going to be a number. And so I'm going to save that. I'm going to start my live server. And we get this ugly but functional total amount. Okay, that works for me. We identified we also need a label for our tip amount. And that is going to be another input type number. Okay, well, that's there, but that's kind of ugly. I want that down on the next line, right? I don't want it going across. So we can just throw in a quick little line break here and refresh. Now they're on two different lines. That's okay. Now, what's the last thing that we need here in our user interface? Two things, actually. I'm going to type in 100 and I'm going to type in 20 and
display.
Yeah, we need basically a calculate button, right? So I'm going to put a button in here and I'm going to say calculate tip. Come back over here. I'm going to put my calculate tip button on another line. Fresh, do my 100, I do my 20, I hit calculate tip. Okay, we've got to make that work, but I'm going to take a moment there, let you guys catch up if you need it. We created our new file over here on the left. We called it index.html. We did our exclamation point enter. That got us our entire template in. Then in the body, we started creating a label for our total amount and an input type number for it. Then we did a line break and did our tip amount label. Then we did our input type and another line break, and we did our final calculate tip button.
I don't have the terminal in my window. Should I set that up now or should I not worry about it until we do the JavaScript?
You do not need your terminal, and you will not need that terminal because the console that we will be using will be in the browser instead of in VS Code. Good question, but no, you don't need it yet. All right, who's lost? Talk to me. Got 11 people in class tonight, and only 6 of you have voted. So I'm going to guess that you are still working on it, unless you vote no, but keep going. Otherwise, let me know if you guys need any help or if you're stuck somewhere. And again, if you're not following along, that's completely fine, but just go ahead and vote a no, but keep going, just so I know where the class is at. You want to share the screen, Christy? I saw you come off mute. You're unmuted.
Oh, so what happened was, my stuff didn't show up in JavaScript when we were on the other thing, and so that's why I stopped, because I didn't get those things. So now when I try to go to the live share, I clicked something and it said, do you want to save your tip/terminal.js? And then everything popped up. So that's why I did what I did, because it was something as simple as I didn't save. So I'm ready. We can keep going.
Okay. Anyone else stuck or need help before we keep going? I know that HTML came out of the blue and it's got everyone shocked that coming back up. But the good news is this is almost all of the HTML we are going to write tonight. We need 3 more lines in here, and then we will be done with all of our HTML. Anyone need more time, or are we good to proceed? Come on, y'all. It's only Thursday. Don't burn out on me yet. All right, let's keep going here. So we've got all of this going on, but this is the first time we've really got a good, hey, we want to make our HTML interactive, right? We want to make something so when they click on that button, it does something. Well, what we could do is we could put a script tag in here and start writing our JavaScript, but that is actually not the recommended way of doing it. Just like how we can externally link to our CSS using the link href, we can externally link to our JavaScript as well. So I'm going to come over here to the new file, and I'm going to create script.js. And in there, I'm going to just console log hello world and make sure to save it. Make sure to save it because we do not want to forget that save. Now we're going to come back to our index.html, and in this script tag right here, inside the opening script tag, I'm going to say src, which stands for the source of the script tag, and I'm going to say that is script.js. So I'm going to save that. Again, my script.js over here, let me just split screen it. My script.js says hello world. My script tag is over here, right underneath the body tag. That says script source equals script.js. Make sure you've got your quotes right. Make sure you've got your opening and closing tags right. Make sure everything is good to go there. And to test to see if that is working, I'm going to go to my browser. I'm going to right click and I'm going to go to inspect. And then we've been working all in this elements tab, right? But we're going to switch it over to the console tab. And I'm going to close that out. And notice we've got our hello world showing up. Now we are not using the terminal to see the output of our console. We're using the console built right into the browser in order to see our output. So I know I just did a poll, but if you don't have this step done, you're not going to be able to follow along at all. So I want to make sure everyone's caught up to this point. So I'm just going to do a quick relaunch of the poll and make sure that you guys have your script.js tag working, your console.log in your new script.js folder, and you can see hello world in your console. And again, how I got to it in Chrome, I right click, I go to inspect, I go to console, and then down here, I get my hello world. I will leave that up, sorry. Does anyone need help?
So I don't have what I thought I had. I don't have the package. I don't know why that's not.
That's fine, you don't need it.
But I don't have, so I create my own script.js?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, you don't need the node modules because we're not using the prompts package in our browser. We're building the prompting interface ourselves.
Max, can you just walk through one more time how you got the hello world?
Yep. Give me 1 second. Sorry, Zoom was being a pain and not letting me, still gonna be a pain. It's not letting me see poll results the way I normally do.
Maybe it's that I didn't do. Okay, hold on.
Okay. Okay, from the very beginning here. First thing we did is we went over to the files and we created a new file. We called that file script.js and hit enter. Once we have that file created, if you don't have node modules, package lock, or package.json, that's all fine. You don't need those files. Those are all just left over from the first half of the project here. So you create a new file, you call it script.js and hit enter. From there, you go to your script.js and you add a console.log hello world. Go ahead and save that file. Make sure that you have an X up here instead of the dot. Dot means the file is not saved. The X means that it is. We then come over to our index.html, and towards the bottom, we add a script, src equals quote script.js, and then we go ahead and close out the rest of that information there. That is what is linking this file over here to telling our browser, hey, we need to go run that JavaScript. So then the last thing we're going to do is over here on the right, we are going to go to the total amount and the tip amount and right click and go to inspect. That is going to open up our elements down here, and we're going to switch our elements over to our console, and that's where we get our hello world.
Mine ain't showing that.
You want to share your screen, Wayne?
Inspect. Go to console.
Okay, everything looks fine there. Go to your script.js. Console log does not take an equals, it takes parentheses.
And
no problem. Anyone else have questions before we move on?
I have a quick question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Are we, I know you probably just said this, but we're keeping the tip count part, right?
The
Like the
tip
the
dash
file.
terminal file that is created.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
That we won't use that, so that won't impact anything that we do.
Okay, because I had deleted it and I was trying to start over. So yeah.
Okay. We are good to keep going, I'm guessing. Okay, so what we first need to do is we need to get our JavaScript to be able to respond, right? When we click on this calculate tip button, we want our JavaScript to actually like jump into action and do something. So we're going to go to our script.js. I'm going to take out my console log hello world. I only put that there to make sure that our files are linking, right? So just like we did our color red to make sure our script.js was working, we do our console log hello world just to make sure that it's linked. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a special keyword called document. We're going to say document, and we are going to say .get element by ID. And this is a lowercase d that's going to get you. So what this document is that's our HTML document. That is this HTML over here. And we're going to use that dot because we're calling a special method on the document called get element by ID. Well, in order to be able to make our button respond to something, we need an ID on it. So I'm going to add an ID here, and I'm going to call it calculate button. So I'm going to save my HTML. I'm going to come back to my JavaScript, and then I'm going to say the element that I want to get by the ID is called calculate button. And what I would like to do is say when it is on click, right? So on is a special keyword that JavaScript is saying, hey, some event is going to happen here. And there are lots of different kinds of events that can happen, right? A user could be typing into something. A user could start scrolling the page. A user could start doing a ton of stuff. But we want to say when the user on clicks, right? When the user clicks on this button, we want something to happen. So I'm going to say equal, and I'm going to use my function syntax. So equal is saying, hey, this is what I want to happen on the click of the calculated button, which we're getting by the ID in the document. And we're going to use empty parentheses here because we don't need any parameters, but we do need a function. We need it to do a couple different things. So we say an arrow function and our curly braces, which is saying, hey, a function is coming. And then this is enough code. There's enough that could go wrong here that I want to console.log out calculate button clicked. So I'm going to go back over to my JavaScript. I'm going to make sure, first of all, my index and my script are saved. I'm going to go back over here. I'm now going to hit the calculate tip button, and I have my calculate button clicked printing out. How are we feeling? Good? So we now run into the next problem of great. Now I've got this code that can run, and that's fine. But now we need to do the actual calculation, right? So what we're going to do is, in order to know what the numbers are that are typed in, we need to access the input that those numbers are typed in on. So what we're going to do is we're going to say const total input. Now, this is not the actual number. This is not the total yet. All we're doing is trying to get a hook from our JavaScript into our HTML to get the input that is holding the number. So we're going to reuse the same document.get element by ID. And the ID that we want is going to say total. But that's not going to work unless we come over here and on our input type number, add an ID of total. So just to make sure that that's working, all I'm going to do is console log out my total input.
So we put it, the console log, but that we put in, we're scrapping that.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, you can leave it in there if you want. It's not going to hurt anything. So to test to see if this is working, this code should only work when I click on my calculate button. And what it should be doing is it should be getting my total, which is the ID we added to the input, storing it in total input for me, because we're going to use it later, and then console logging it out. So I come in here, I'm going to type in 100 and I'm going to hit calculate tip and I get null. Okay, that's why we test, because I was super confident that was going to work and I broke it myself. So we're going to check that. We're going to say document get element by ID total. And I added my ID total, but notice what I didn't do. I did not save my index.html. So I'm going to save that, come back over here, and we're going to try that again. 100 calculate tip. And now what I get coming out is my input type number ID equals total. So this is weird, right? Because this is HTML in our JavaScript console. But what this is proving is that when our button was clicked, this whole function is running, and it was able to properly go into my HTML, pull out my total input value, and then shove it out in my JavaScript console for me. So we're going to need to do the same thing for our ID equals tip. And we are going to just do that same thing here. We're going to say const tip input is equal to document dot get element by ID, and the ID is going to be my tip. And I'm not going to forget to get my quotes right here. And I'm going to just change this to say tip input. Switch back over, refresh, type in my numbers, hit calculate tip, and out comes my tip input. So we keep going here. Now I want a specific thing on my tip input. I want the value that is typed into that tip input. So I'm going to say const tip value is equal to tip input dot value. And I'm going to do the same for my total. Total value is equal to total input dot value, right? I'm going into whatever this input is that's coming out from the ID and digging into a property that's available to me on it. And that property is the value, right? The value that is typed into the input. I am then going to console log out my tip value and my total value. So I will stop after this one, but if I type in 120 and hit calculate tip, I get 20 and 100 coming out. So I'm going to stop there. If you don't have 20 and 100 coming out of your console, this is where you vote in the poll or ask for questions. All right, you got to talk to me. If you're voting that you're lost, either shoot me a message and I can answer the question, or come off of mute and let me know where are you lost, what do you need help with?
Okay, Max, I am lost at the point I am getting an error in my inspect, and it's saying uncaught type error, but I'm gonna share my screen with you. So you
go ahead.
Okay, 1 second. Oh, I think only shared. I'm gonna stop because I think I only shared that one screen.
No, you were good. You shared everything.
Oh, I did. Okay, sorry. Let's try again. Okay.
Okay, so let's use this as an example. Go back to that error message for a second.
Yep.
It's saying cannot set properties of null setting on click. Okay, and then it's saying script.js : 1. That's telling you that that's a problem on the first line of code in script.js.
Okay.
So we're going to go to script.js, and it's saying cannot set property on click of null. Right? And so here's our on click. And no, let me Okay, here we go. Here's our on click. So the problem isn't with the on click. It's saying it's trying to set an on click of null, meaning it doesn't know how to get what you're trying to get. So if you look at your index.html, you've got your calculate button in here with an ID on it, and you're perfect and you're good to go. So let's go back to your script.js. And in your script.js, you're getting the element by ID, but you're getting it from a variable called calculate button. Did you define a variable called calculate button?
No. Oh, I'm missing my parentheses.
You're missing your quotes.
I'm in my quotes. I'm sorry. Gotcha.
So
okay.
I'm harping on that error message just to show you that the error message is trying to help you out. It's trying to say, like, I'm trying to do on click on something of null. I don't know what the on click is supposed to be going on. And so that error message to me is telling me, hey, the problem isn't with the on click, it's what comes before the on click. So maybe I need to look in there and figure out what's missing.
Okay. Now, sorry, while I'm right here.
Yep.
So check to make sure that I did that portion right. I should
be able to click on the button and have something console log out.
Okay. Sorry, use the 100. Am I supposed to put anything inside of that console?
On click.
Sorry.
Inside the on click, there should be a console.log like button clicked.
Can you just show me so I can?
Yep. You want to share your screen?
Yeah. Sorry.
Okay, so let me just come in here. So what we're going to do is, this is a good review for everyone. We're going to, in here, we're just going to say console dot, oh, no, we're not. Console.log button clicked. I know it's spelled wrong, but it's fine. It's not going to be there for long. And then we are going to refresh and we're going to type in some numbers and hit calculate tip, and we get our button clicked.
Gotcha.
So what that's telling us is, hey, we made it this far. The on click is running when it should. And you have your get element by IDs in here, which is good. So the only other things you need to do is say, hey, now that we've got the input, we want to store the value that is in that input. So we're going to go into the tip input and we're going to pull out the value. And we're going to do that for the total value as well. We're going to go to the total input and pull out the value. And then when we're done with all of that, we're going to log out the tip value and the total value to make sure both of them are having the numbers in them that we type in. So we come back over here, we type in our numbers, we hit calculate tip, and we get cannot read properties of null reading value. And it's saying script 6. So I'm going to come over here, and 6 is my tip input line. So I know something's got to be wrong with that. So where is tip input coming from? It's coming from up here, and it's trying to get the element by the ID of tip. So we're going to go back to our index.html, and we're going to look here, and you do have the tip on there. What you don't have is the total. You get the peace of mind that your new home and your. So I'm going to save that. I'm going to save that, and we're going to try that again. So let's do 160 and calculate, and now we get our numbers coming out.
Okay.
You are completely caught up. Did you not understand any of that?
No, I followed it. I'm sorry. I had just got lost back there. I got it though. Thank you.
No problem. Stephanie, go ahead.
I think I solved it, but let me, when you're going over hers and said that there was an error in the script,
Yeah.
So I see in the corner, and then that took me here, so I forgot the parentheses.
You did. You also have a capital D in ID.
Oh.
And I agree with you because that's how I camel case my ID is with a capital D, but JavaScript has different thoughts on how ID should be spelled.
So I should change all these then.
Yeah.
Is there anything else?
All of that looks good to me.
Okay. And then, so then you just went over here and did this.
Oh, you know what? Go back to your code. You're missing a capital B in by. In all of them. For get element by ID, the B should be capitalized.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
You probably already said that this already, but what is the get element by ID doing?
Yeah, that's what's telling it. So the document dot, and that's where you should be, Stephanie. So you should be good to go. Yep.
Okay.
You're caught up.
Thank you.
So the let me just share my screen. So this document is referring to the HTML document. When we say document dot, we're saying, hey, we're going to be working on our HTML over here. The get element by ID is basically pulling this whole input into our JavaScript and giving us access to work on some things related to it. So get element by ID, there are actually multiple ways of getting an element. You could get it by class name, you can get it by tag type, but we're going to get it by ID because that's the easiest way to say this is the one specific one that I'm looking for. And then we need to tell it, hey, there are parameters in here. What's the name of the ID that we're trying to get? This is going to be the calculate button. So that means we're pulling in this whole button. Now that we've got access to that whole thing, we're going to use a special property on it called onClick, which is saying, hey, run this code. We then come in and pass it a function, and this function doesn't have any parameters. So that's why we've got the empty parentheses there. And then we're going to go ahead and execute that function. And the function that we're going to execute is we're going to use get element by ID. We're going to shove them in these two JavaScript variables. And then just like onClick is a special property, dot value is another special property. So that's how we're going to pull it out. And then we just are console logging them. Danielle, go ahead with your question.
Mine ain't showing.
Wayne, I'll come to you next.
Okay. My question is, do you mind if I share my screen?
Yep, go for it.
Okay, thank you.
Input type.
All right. I had an issue to where it's giving me back an error message and it's showing me which line it is, but everything is lining up exactly as how you have it. So I'm not sure what the problem is. And just to show you.
Yep. Go ahead and right click and inspect so we can see your console and the error. And
Okay,
it is.
Hold on, let me move this out the way.
If you hit the little bottom X,
Where?
go over to this one.
What? Over here?
Yep, that one. I'm guessing things are in the way.
I can't see whatever you're circling. I have like a circle that's coming up on a chat or something like that.
Oh, okay, that's fine. Here, let me see if I did that
Are
help
you
at all.
Not able. Oh. I don't know why, but it's circling to chat with Nicole.
Okay. I'll clear that. Just scroll up a little bit there.
Are you able to see where it says HTML button element dot document dot get?
Yeah, on script line 5. Okay, let's go back to your code.
Okay, so I went to script line 5. The only thing I can think of is I did not know how you got the arrow function. So is that it?
Yep, that is correct. And your get element by ID looks fine. So let's go back to your index.html.
Can I ask you, is this the proper arrow?
It
Because
is.
I just used the less than sign, or maybe the greater than sign.
That is correct. Equals and greater than is the way to get the arrow. So if you go to your index.html, The problem is that you don't have the IDs added to the inputs for the two different numbers.
Okay. Oh yeah, you're right. I don't. Go ahead and add. What was it?
Just go one spot over to the right on your cursor. Yep, there you go. And that's going to be the ID equals total. And then your other is going to be an ID equals tip. And guys, we're going to take a break here. So let's be back at 7:20, and then we'll finish this off and get into the data exercise.
You wanna? Yeah. Oh crap.
Oh, you're good to go.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Wayne.
Okay.
And if you've got this working, if you got numbers showing up, go ahead and take a break. We'll be back at 6:20.
So when I do this, it says.
Okay, so you need to just go to your JavaScript. And so you're console logging total input. You should be logging tip value and total value.
Right here?
Yep. You've got everything right there. Your console log is telling it to log out the input. We don't want it to log out the input. We want it to log out the values.
Oh. So put value instead of input?
Yeah. So hold on. I think something's not clicking here. What we're doing is we're going to the HTML and getting the total, and then we store that in a thing called total input here.
Okay.
We then come down and use that total input right here, and then we go in and we grab another thing out of it, and that's the value. And then that whole value of this whole thing gets stored into this total value right here. So that total value is what we want to put into our console log there in order for that value to be printed out.
Oh, okay. Get you now. This is my.
And then if you do a comma, you can also print out your tip value. A comma inside the console log, parentheses.
Oh.
Yep, right there. And then do tip value as well.
Space tip value.
Yep. And save and go to your browser, type in 2 numbers and hit the button.
Okay.
Good to go.
That's where I was messing up. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Christy, go ahead. Although if I leave in 3 minutes, it's because I have to take a quick phone call for my house.
Okay. Yeah, I have everything. I watched what you did with everybody, and I have this, and I have this. But when I come here, this is the message that I'm getting.
Go to your console.
Here.
The top, that one. Yep. Okay. Now type in 2 numbers. And calculate tip, and you're good to go.
I was in the wrong spot. Okay. All right.
Nicole, do you need help?
But we do need that first one, the tip terminal. We do need that one, tip terminal. Because mine just says uncaught reference error.
Tip terminal you do not need.
And when I click calculate, it just says uncaught reference error. Total value is not defined. So I'll figure it out.
That's going to be a problem in your script.js. There's it might be like a
capital T, I see it.
That's it.
Sorry.
That's fine. Anyone else? Cool.
All right. Yeah, where's my screen? And then it's doing some weird stuff in the. Actually, let me try something really quickly. Tip amount, total amount 120, 100.50. Tip amount 20. Calculate tip.
So that should be doing the right thing.
Okay, I guess when I do it in terminal, we go to terminal then. Oh, I got too much experience. Okay. So stop this. Clear. Run it. So if I put 120.6.
Yeah. Okay. So go to your tip terminal.js file.
Tip terminal.js.
And scroll up to the first question. Well, that's interesting. Prompts, total number, float true. None of that looks wrong. Are you go to your terminal and hit Control-C to cancel out of whatever you're in, and then run a PWD and make sure that you're in the right folder?
That might be a great point. That might be an excellent point. Let's see. What happened here? I'm gonna quit everything. PWD.
So you're in week 7, day 4, which is where I think you are.
Yep.
Float true, await prompts, require prompts, float. Try it again. I might be stumped here. So do like 100 point, the decimal period.
Hold on. 100 points. 9.5 just breaks it out. Let me do 0 tip. So it should be $195 there. I mean $100.95. Nope.
Oh, you know what? Is mine not working? 100.95. No, mine does. It's weird. It doesn't type the dot on mine, but then when you do the 9.5, it does let it go through. So you're literally typing 100 period and then 1.
Yep. And then, like I said, I put 0 for the tip, and it just gave me $95. So it took it 95 as the bill.
Yeah, as the input. I'm a little stumped on that one because you've got your float true in there, and that's all that I have added in. And
let me move it up. Want to see if that helps anything. I don't know, just in case. $100.9. Nope, doing it again. Then it didn't even get to the 9.
Here, let me. One last thing I want to try.
Oops, I'm sorry.
I'm gonna try. Let's do this. I'm gonna just take the whole thing and copy it and put it in a separate file called test.js. Dump it in there. And then in here, I'm going to do my node test.js and 100 dot. What in the world would be causing that when you have your float true?
I have a random. Is there supposed to be another number in front of the answers dot tip or like something else? No.
Total answers dot tip. No, the problem is in this function, because that float true should be letting you type in the number, and it's just overriding it. I feel like I'm missing something obvious. Larry, can you just copy and paste this whole code to me in Slack, and I will come back to you on it?
Like you say, the whole code, terminal, index.html and everything, or
just the tip-terminal.js.
Okay, will do.
Yeah, I don't see anything wrong with that, so I'm gonna have to dive into that to figure it out.
Hey, this is Doug. Well, I'm having a problem with mine as well. Sorry, I just got back from the break. I caught the tail end of Larry's thing. Was it not typing the number correctly?
It was not letting him enter a decimal.
Same with mine. And then after the decimal, when I would type more numbers, it would start deleting numbers, like deleting digits from the number.
There may be something weird going on with the prompts package, because I have the float true and it's working on mine. Mine does here. Let me just share my screen. When I run mine and I do like 100 dot, it doesn't type the period, but then when I type, 100.56, then it works. But I wonder if there is some 100.56. No, that's working fine. Oh, but then it just did something weird where it cleared it out. 100.98 delete 7. So I just hit delete once and it like cleared the whole thing when I typed the next number. So there may be something glitchy in that prompts package where it isn't working with floats the way it should, and that's what's causing the problem. It was not glitchy when I see, I don't think it's you guys or your code. I think it's something in the package that's causing problems. I will revisit that and let you guys know. But back to the browser where we aren't having problems, hopefully. So let's just touch on where we left off. If you type in your two numbers and you hit your calculate tip down in the terminal, it logs out our two values, right? So this should largely be the same of what we did in our terminal, or in our terminal version, right? So we need the tip amount. So I'm just going to copy the whole line of my const tip in my tip terminal.js, and I'm going to paste it in here. And what this is this is calculating the tip amount, but we don't really have answers.total anymore. That is called total value. So I'm going to copy that and paste it in here. And we don't have answers.tip. What we actually have is tip value. So I'm going to take that and paste that in there. Then I'm going to come down. I'm going to console log out my tip amount. I'm going to save it. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to type in my 100 and my 20 and hit calculate tip. And I get 20 coming out. Okay, well, there's my tip amount. So
could you go over that again?
Yep. So I took the tip amount line right from my terminal.js, right? So we calculated the tip the same way we calculated it using our terminal, right? We take the total value and we times it by whatever the tip value is, but we divide it by 100 because we want to convert 20% to 0.2. So we move the decimal place over 2 spots. The total value is coming in from our input and it's pulling the value outside of it. Then we're dividing it by 100. And that's the tip amount that we get. And then we console log it out. But we know the console is only for developers, right? That's only so we can see the code that's running. It really should be showing up in the HTML. But before we can make it show up in the HTML, we have to have a placeholder in our HTML that we can shove it into, right? We need a hole that we can basically do this process in reverse. So I'm going to go to my index.html, and right beneath my button, I'm going to create an ID and I'm going to create a div, and I'm going to put an ID on that called results. Now, there's nothing in results when the page first loads. That makes sense. There aren't any results. But we now have a placeholder that we can dump our tip information into. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say document.getElement by ID. And the ID we're passing in is results. And then we're going to use a new property in here that we haven't used before, and that's going to be inner HTML. So basically what we're saying is inside the results div, set some HTML in that we're about to tell you about. And we're going to say that inner HTML is now going to equal a string, and that string is going to say your tip amount is, and I'm going to add in my tip amount. So I save, I come back over to my browser, I type 100, I type 20, I hit calculate tip, and it says your tip amount is $20. And we want to just finish that off with our other part that says, and your total amount will be. So we're going to add a plus, and we're going to say your total amount will be our $, and then we are going to say take our total value and add to it our tip amount and save. And we come over here and we say 120 and hit calculate tip. And we get your total amount will be 120, 10,020. Well, that's weird. Something went wrong there. So I'm going to take a step back and I'm going to say, all right, well, total value and tip amount, we have them logging out. So if I come over here, it says 20 and 100. Well, those are the two adding together, but what are they behaving like? It's like behaving like those numbers are strings. So we're going to go back to our JavaScript and we're going to use a new command that says type of tip value. And when we come back to our JavaScript and type in our numbers and hit calculate tip, it tells us 20, sneaky little devil, isn't 20 as a number. It's actually 20 as a string. And that's because the input type, even though we told it number, JavaScript is always going to pull an input back as a string. It's never actually doing what we call parsing and converting the text typed into that input into an actual number type. So when we're looking at this 20, it's actually 20 in quotes. And when we're looking at this 100, it's actually 100 in quotes. So what we need to do is convert that data type from a string back to a number so we can do actual math with it. So what we're going to do is we're going to use this thing called parse. Parsing is whenever you take one data type and convert it to another, and we're going to parse it to a float. And a float, again, is just a number with a decimal in it. And this one, because our tip doesn't need to support a decimal in it, this one, we can parse it as an integer or an int. And again, what this is doing is it is converting it from const tip value. Right now, it's coming in as 20 in quotes, but we don't want it to come in 20 as quotes. We want it to come in as 20 as a number. And so that's what this part parse float is doing is it's converting our string up here into that number data type. So if this works, we should now be able to come in here, refresh, do our 120 and calculate the tip. And it makes a little liar out of me because I forgot to save. 120, calculate tip, and now we get our new tip, our new total will be 120. So the last thing we're going to do, and then I will pause and poll and make sure everyone is caught up before we move on to our next exercise, is we're going to run into the same problem here. If I do 112.87 and I make my tip, 17%, we get your tip amount is 19.04000003, right? We don't have a round function built into this. But the cool part of JavaScript is it doesn't matter if it's running in the terminal or running in your browser, we can reuse those functions. So I can take my entire round function that we used in our terminal, copy it and paste it over here. And then over in our calculations, I can just surround them with round. And now when I run that same math, we get our nice rounded numbers. Okay, this is the whole program. To read it from the top down to the bottom, we go to our HTML document. We tell it to go find an element using its ID, and in that parameter, we tell it the ID is calculated button. Once we get that whole thing, we tell it when that button is clicked on, run this function with no parameters. This is the arrow function, and the curly brace is saying this is all the code that's going to run when we click on it. We then go to our JavaScript and we say, hey, create a spot for the total input to be stored as a JavaScript variable, go back to our HTML and pull out the input value. I'm sorry, go pull out the input element. Now also do that for the tip input, but we don't actually want just the input. We want the value inside of the input. So what we do is we go to tip value and we pull out the value from that HTML element. But those little tricksters are giving us those numbers that we have typed in as strings. So we're going to use our parse float to convert that string out into a number, and then we're going to store that in tip value. We are then going to console log those out just to make sure that we've got access to them. And we check the type of tip value to make sure that it's really a number now. We then do another console log after we calculate the tip amount by doing a little math that everyone loves. And then we go back to our document. We go to the element, get element by ID, and we pull out the results div that we created. And in that, we are saying, go get the inner HTML, because we are now doing this process in reverse. We went and we got some elements and we pulled data out of them using the value. But now we are taking this inner HTML and we're going to shove some things into the HTML to make it show up in the browser. From there, we're going to add a little string here, and we're going to use our round function to display the tip amount. And we're going to keep on concatenating strings. And then we're also going to add in our total amount. And then the last thing we do is we defined our round function. So the round function is going to take a parameter of an input. It is going to take the input, multiply by 100, or just move the decimal over 2 places. It then rounds that out so there aren't any trailing decimal places. And then it divides it by 100 to move that decimal place back over. It returns that to where it is initially being called. So this whole thing ends up just being the total amount. Okay, we're gonna just pause there because I want to make sure everyone is feeling good about this. We're gonna relaunch this. This will be a homework assignment that I will post tonight that will be due on Sunday. So if you need to review this, this is fine. I am like Santa Claus. I do know when you're copying my code and being naughty, So make sure you're typing this out and getting the practice of using your JavaScript syntax, typing all of that out. Stephanie, go ahead with your question.
Yeah, let me share my screen. I'm stuck over here. It says 16,
Yep.
but I don't know what's wrong.
So you're calling round, but round isn't a function that's built into JavaScript. It's one that we actually made our own function. So if you go to the outline and pop open my code, I have something called const round, and that's a function we created ourselves. The second one, yeah, that one, the one that I'm on, that. And scroll down to oh, I called it number rounder, but it's that line 21 through 23. Up a little bit, right here. So if you copy that and paste that into your JavaScript, at the bottom or the top, it doesn't matter.
Oh, okay.
And then just change the name number rounder to just call it round. And take out the R. And now you should be good to go.
Okay, cool.
So should I be getting my, because I feel like I should have did it anyways, but my tip terminal out of the trash because I feel like it has all those things that I don't have on it when I take it out.
It's up to you. The tip terminal doesn't need to be turned in. Good work, Stephanie. So it's up to you if you want to leave it in trash or you want to pull that out. Or honestly, it's probably not bad practice to type it out yourself and get the practice of creating the function, making the function have the parameter input, and then returning out the math.round that's doing the math.
Okay, thank you.
How are we feeling? Are we feeling like, I know this is really boring and it's math and it's just a tip calculator, but are we feeling unlocked? Are we thinking on our capstone, oh man, we can start making buttons interactive, and oh look, we can start actually building applications that someone can type in a number and click a button and have something be done? Are we getting excited about JavaScript at 7:43 on a Thursday night? I know you guys are sick of me already, but you don't get rid of me until, I think, all the way until next Thursday. We're going to have a guest teacher come in and cover for me while I drive up to Syracuse.
I'm excited to know that we made it to Thursday and I can tackle this from Friday to Sunday to get a better understanding, to be ready to, so maybe by next week, I'll be ready to make some buttons on my capstone. But right now, this is a lot.
Not a problem.
Actually, take a look at mine again.
Yep, go for
it. Let's see, refresh. So I put in, let's do 150. Well, I want to do a decimal, that's right, 150, $1.50. 10% of that would be 15%. I mean, 15 cents. Get this out the way. And then it gives me $1.10.
So 150 times 1.10.
It should be 165, $1.65.
165, yeah, you're right. All right, so let's go to your code.
Yeah, so, okay. That's probably clearly a mistake in my code, yeah. All right, and let's see, scripts. Which file do you want to go to?
Parse float, parse int. Okay, so here's your problem. Hold on. I'm wondering if you did $1.50 and 10%. Oh, mine's broken too. Huh. Okay.
Because really, it's only taking a dollar. It's not taking a decimal. Then yeah, so it's saying a dollar, then 10% of a dollar is a dime. So it's only taking the dollar. It's not taking the decimal in either place.
Okay, let's see. Okay, so. Oh, I really hope it's not this bug.
I can stop sharing. All right, yeah, okay. If you're trying to share your screen, it's not. I'm showing that.
Yeah, no, I was just trying to find the problem before I shared.
Oh, I think I might have some insight. Mine just said in the total bill field, told me, please enter I had 1.5. It said, please enter a valid number. The two closest valid numbers are 1 and 2. Like it doesn't want a decimal in there. So if it was rounding $1.50 and you put 10%, that would be $1.10.
Well, it's truncating it, so it's getting rid of the decimal part totally.
Yeah, here, let me share my screen so we can debug through this. So the first thing I thought was, let's throw a console log here for our total input dot value. And then let's also have our total value console log. Oh, you know what it is? I flipped these two. The tip value is what should be the integer, and the total value is what should be a float.
Okay.
I bet you that's going to fix it. Refresh, make sure I save. 150, 10%, calculate tip. Now we're getting it out. So I flipped those two.
Okay.
Congratulations.
But what I was doing to debug that was I put a console log up here and I put a console log down here. And so when I first ran it, this console log came out with 150. Well, that was right. But the problem was that it wasn't coming out with 1.5 here. And so that's how I knew, hey, this console log is right. This console log is wrong, which means something must be broken in here.
Okay. Yeah, it's working now. Thank you.
And good catch. We definitely want to test for those. All right, we've got most of our votes in. Last chance for questions. Oh, yep. Go ahead, Wayne.
Yeah, I'm gonna just share mine. It's saying line 12. Not sure why.
Did you create your div called results in index.html? No, you did not. In after line 14, we created a div with an ID of results. And save. Head back to the browser. And refresh. Well, it's a live server, you shouldn't have to. Good to go.
Hey, Max, quick question. What you had Danielle, I think that was Danielle, copy and paste from what you said you had created.
Yes.
Did she drop that in her HTML or
JavaScript? The bottom of the JavaScript file.
All right, so I can just drop it anywhere at the bottom. All right, go back in. Okay, thank you.
Yep. Anyone else need help before we call this project a wrap and move on to our next one?
This is just off of what she was just saying too, and that goes inside of the curly brace with the semicolon.
It doesn't have to, but it can.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on this?
For mine, when I have a output, if it's like $1.60, it says 1.6. Is there a quick way to fix that to make it go to the
Oh, I
100th
knew
place?
I was going to get that question and was not prepared to answer it. So, there is, and I'm now totally prepared to answer that question. So, what we did is we did our rounder, right? But our rounder has the problem of if we have $1.60, it says 1.6. But when we start to think about this, there are actually a lot of different currencies out there, and they all have different number formats, right? So like when we write currency, we would write it with commas every 3 digits. But in other countries, the comma actually represents the separator between the dollar and the cents amount. So wouldn't it be cool if JavaScript were like an international programming language that would be able to do that for us? So what I'm going to do is instead of calling it round, I'm going to say currency formatter, and I'm just going to rename my 2 functions here to that and that here. And then what I'm going to do is instead of returning math.round and doing the math, I'm going to return a new international, no, not internal, bad JavaScript, a new international number format. And we are going to say that that number format is coming in as English, I think. Doing this somewhat on the fly, so let's see if this works. And the style that we're going to use is for currency. And that currency is then going to format the inputted number that we put in. No chance this works the first time. 1.5, 10%, calculate tip. Currency code is required with currency style. So we need to add one more in here that says currency, and that's going to be USD. 150, 10%, calculate tip. All right, we got 2 extra $signs there, but let me go over this code. This is not required for the homework assignment, but it is a good value to show you what JavaScript can do for you. So what we did is because there are all kinds of different currencies out there, there is this thing called INTL, which does all kinds of international formatting for you, and that's built right into JavaScript. So oftentimes before this was released, you would actually have to install a new package that would handle all different kinds of currencies for you. But because this is such a widely used feature, JavaScript built it right in. So what we're doing is we have to use this new keyword here because this formatter has a lot of different options with it. And really what we're doing is creating an instance of our number formatter that we could use later. So we call in INTL, which is that international thing, and then we call in the number format because there are all different kinds of international formatters built into this INTL thing. We tell it what language code we're using. EN is the universal language code for English. And then we pass it a couple options in an object. One is saying, hey, the number that we're trying to format is currency. And then the currency that we're formatting itself is USD, US dollars. And then after all of that, we tell it to format the input that we're passing into it, which is that dollar. So we could, this is one way of solving it. This is like the way overboard way of solving it. I am going to show you one other way as well. We're going to pull back in the first way that we did it, which is, oh, I don't have it. Return, let's just say const rounded equals math.round our input times 100 divided by 100. And then we will say, oh, I'm regretting showing this technique. We're just going to leave it at this. There's a way we could do it with using a string and figuring out that the period was the second to last thing instead of the third to last thing. So because of that, we should add a 0 on at the end of it. But this is by far the much cleaner way of doing it. Sorry, I tangented a little too hard there, but it is cool to show off like the newer features of JavaScript and the power of what it can do under the hood automatically for you. Stephanie, do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Yeah, let me share my screen. How come this is showing up as this 2007? That's
correct.
It is.
Yeah, so basically it's saying you would tip $20 on $100.35 bill, and then the total amount of the bill would be $120, including the tip.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure the numbers are adding up here.
Yep, you're good. 20% of 100 is roughly $20.
Oh, I was doing it as like dollar amount. All right, perfect. Thank you.
No problem. Sorry, if that international number formatter went right over your head, that's completely fine. Just wanted to show how it could be used. Okay, any other questions on this before we dive into some nested data? Okay, this last one for tonight is going to be follow along, but it is not going to be for homework. So I just want to talk through nested data because it is very common that we're not just working with a single object or a single array. We're working with a whole bunch of data. So I'm going to say, excuse me, apparently have the hiccups. I'm not sharing my screen. I'm going to go into my files and I'm going to create my last file for the night called schools.js. And then I am going to go to the week 7 day 4 outline, and I'm going to open up the school nested data. And I'm going to copy line 1 all the way down to line 51. And then I am not going to cheat and look at all of the solutions. I'm only going to copy down to line 51. I'm then going to take that data, go back into my schools.js day 4 and paste it in. So we have this mega object, actually an array going on. So this has got all kinds of data in it, right? It's got 3 types of schools. And in each one of those schools, the schools have teachers. And in those teachers, each teacher, we assume they only teach one class, has a name, the class that they teach, the students, and the grades of those students. So this is actually, although it looks like a huge object, this is a very common thing to see this much data coming in one JavaScript variable. This is all stored in schools. So the most important thing that you need to do when you're reading this is saying every time that I go a level deeper into this object, what kind of data am I dealing with? Because this schools is an array, and that array has only 3 objects in it, 1, 2, and 3. And then those objects have 2 keys in them, type and teachers, and teachers itself is an array of objects. And in that array of objects, we have the data. And then we can even go one layer deeper and have an array in that object, in an array, in an object that is in an array. And we can tell all of that based off of, is that a square brace, meaning it's an array, or is that a curly bracket, meaning that it is an object? So we're going to accomplish 4 things here, and I might leave the last one as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things here, and I might leave the last one as a challenge if you are looking to do it yourself, a little extra credit. So first thing we want to do is we would like to print out all the school types. So how are we going to do that? Well, we want to get out high and middle and elementary.
You can do double array stuff.
Yep.
Like two-dimensional.
So we're going to start with console.log, and we know the data we want to get to is in schools. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here. I'm going to just type in schools, and I want to make sure that the data that I'm trying to get access to is in there. So I'm going to right-click, open an integrated terminal. I'm going to run node schools.js. Okay, and what comes out of here is my node schools.js, and I see all of the data on here. So I'm on the right track. So where do I go from there? I've got my schools. How am I going to get in access to my elementary, middle, and high?
So the first one would be at 0.
Yep. So we're going to
And
do .0, which is saying
then-
basically select this whole object. Whoop. And then what are we going to do?
And then 0 again inside the brackets for the first element in that particular object.
So let's do that and run it, and we get undefined.
Oh,
So we went in maybe too deep. Let's just come out one step, run it, and now we get our type elementary, but
dot type.
this
Dot
is,
type.
is an object. So we're going to
Yeah, dot
nestle
type.
in and just get the type. Okay, so now I've got elementary coming out. So let's take a step back there. Schools is this whole giant array. The first thing we want to do is just get the first school information here. So that's what this bracket 0 is saying get the first item in the array. And now we've got this object going on that we've got access to. So from within that object, we want to get the type. So what we could do is just repeat that. We're going to take the whole thing and just say, well, we got 3 schools. We want to get the first school, the second school, and the third school. So we save it, we run it, and we get elementary, middle, high. Okay, well, that's great. But what happens when our school board decides, hey, we're going to add another school type for intermediate school? Well, now when we run our code, we get elementary, middle, intermediate, and we lost our high school. So how could we rewrite this code to make sure that no matter how many school types there are, it always is going to print them all out?
Like a for loop or something.
Do a for loop. So what we're going to do is we're going to say for, and we're going to say const school of schools. Every time we go over the schools array, throw each school into this variable. And then, now that we've got it, let's just console log out the whole school. So it looks like it's printing the whole array because it is, but look, we're getting access to each object in that array. We aren't stuck with the data buried in that list. So now what we can do is we can come in here and just say .type and run it, and we get our elementary, middle, intermediate, and high coming out. So again, this for loop is going in, and every time it runs, it's grabbing this entire object and shoving it in this variable called school. And then because it is the object and not this big list that we need to work with, we are able to pull out the individual type. So I'm going to comment this out, and I'm going to take out my type intermediate, and we're going to move on to the next challenge. Any questions on that? Okay, so we're going to move on to, I would like to print out all the teachers in the middle school. And I would like to use a loop in case we add any additional teachers. So we start with our for loop, and we know we want to get access to the teacher, but how do we get access to each individual teacher in the middle school? Someone other than Larry, how are we going to get access to the teachers in the middle school?
You could specify the schools and then the index of the middle school.
Yep. So we're going to say, hey, go into our schools. And again, this is all about going level by level. Now we know it has to be a square bracket because schools is an array. So we're going to say, all right, what index is it? It's not the first index, which is index number 0. It is the second index, which is index number 1. So we're going to say bracket 1. And now if we think about everything that's in that middle school, we need access to one specific thing in it. What do we need access to?
Teacher.
The
Dot
teachers.
name.
Yep. No, just that we can't get dot name yet because where schools bracket 1 is putting us is in this whole big object. And so we can't get access to name until we go through the teachers layer first. So we're going to use dot name, but we're going to say, get the teachers first. Now, every time that you go over the teachers and get each individual teacher, shove them in the teacher constant variable that we just created there. Then we can console log out the teacher's name.
Oh, teacher name.
Because when we are running over it, each teacher is coming out with this whole big object. And so that's what the teacher is, and then we pull out their name from there. So I'm going to run that code, and now we get Miss Johnson and Mr. Williams from our middle school. Okay, I'm going to keep going. What if I would like to print out all of the students' names?
The same thing.
Same
Or
thing.
again, yeah.
What are we going to start looping over?
School.
School of schools.
Oh yeah.
And is students, you specifying.
Do we do?
You can't get in, well, teachers, I guess.
What's
Yep.
the curly bracket again? Oh, okay.
Curly is
Teachers
the
to-
object.
Teachers to get into students.
Yep. So can we do that?
I think so.
We are going to go into a nested for loop. So what this is saying is that we are going to run over all of the teachers, but where are the teachers coming from? They're coming from this individual school.
Right.
So we're going to say school.teachers. Now we have access to the individual teacher. What do we need to do next?
Need to find all the students.
We need to find all the students, but because students is in another array, we've got to loop over that sucker as well. So we're going to come down here and say for const student of where are the students coming from? They're coming from this individual teacher. So we're going to say teacher.students, and then we finally have access to the student's name.
Okay.
So when we run that, we get all of the students printing out.
That would make a lot of sense.
Uh-huh.
But it's important to realize here that even though we're looping over and going in, this loop is running for every time we loop over a teacher, which is running every time we loop over a school. So we can actually do something cool here and say, let student count equal 0. And every time we find another student, bump up the student count by 1.
Oh.
But what we're going to do is we don't want the student count to print out for each student or each teacher or each school. We just want it to print out at the end. So if we put this student count at the end and run it, we get 11 students. But we need to be careful because if we put that console log in, every time we hit a student, it is going to print out the total student count as it is getting added up. So that is the importance of these curly braces. is if it's inside those curly braces, it's going to run every time that loop runs. But if we wanted, for instance, if we wanted it to only print out at the end, we have to be careful on that final student count. Okay. Last one I am going to do, and this is going to be the tricky one. Print out the grade average for each teacher and school. Now let's go back up to our data. We've got these grades in here. So we're going to have to do some math on them to average them out. But we need to dive down into all of this data and be careful about when we're console logging them out to get that data. So where are we going to start?
School of schools.
School of schools.
And we want to pull the teachers info.
Teacher of teachers.
The averaging part, I'm not sure though.
Maybe grades of grades or something like that. Grades or something.
For grade of grades.
Yeah.
You guys are on the right track. Now what do we do?
Console log.
Well, we don't want to console log the grade. All we want to do is console log the grade average for each teacher and each school.
So Max, is this gonna, when it goes through the grades, is it gonna get both of the grades in one iteration, or is it gonna go through this grade, the next, the next set of grades?
It's gonna go through each school, and then for each teacher, and then it's gonna go through each grade. And when it's done going through all of that teacher's grades, it's gonna go through the next teacher's grades.
So it's
And then-
gonna get the two grades in that particular iteration?
Yes.
Okay, so we gotta get both of them, add them together and divide them by 2.
You got it. So to add them together, we take grade and we add it to what?
It's
Oh,
hold on.
so
New
grade plus grade. No,
Find
plus
the
equal.
outside that loop.
Percent.
Yeah,
Plus-
Larry and Doug, you're on the right track. We need some place to store the total.
Right.
We need some running notion of, hey, we need to add all of these grades together
and
Oh.
save it.
and save it. But
Okay.
where are we going to put it? If we put it up here, then we can't reset it for each teacher. So let's just focus on, let's remove that requirement for now. How do we keep track? Where do we define the total for the teacher to make sure that it's going to reset so that when we hit a new teacher, it's going to clear back out and go to 0?
I think between the teacher and the grade for loops.
So what we're going to do here is we're going to say, let teacher total equal 0. Because we got to start it somewhere. Oops. And then we can say, hey, the teacher total, you should plus equal the grade of this loop. Now we just did a whole heck of a lot there. So I just want to see if this is working. So I'm going to come outside my for loop. I'm going to add a console log, and I'm going to say, hey, log out the teacher name. We have access to the teacher here, so we might as well use their name, and then log out the teacher total. And we get an error. The error that we get is teachers is not defined because the teachers come from the school and the grades come from the teacher. Okay, now we've got Mr. Smith, 193, Mr. Matthews, 175, and we go down the list. Okay, so we've got this code working. Now, how do we pull off the actual total?
Yeah, the divided by 2 part.
Outside of the for loop,
Average.
that right below above console log.
Yep.
Divide the grade, teacher total by 2. No, can you do that?
Well, if we divide it by 2, oh, this was bad. What happens if there's a third student who's got a grade in here?
Okay,
By the
by
number
the
of
length,
grades.
so by the length of the, divided by the length of the thing minus 1.
Exactly. What we're going to do is we're going to use the length of the array, which is basically saying how many individual items are in this array, how many grades are stored in this list. So we're going to say the teacher total is going to get divided by the teacher.grades.length. So if there are 3 grades, the length of the array will be 3. And that's a good note, Larry. Length is not 0 indexed, but everything else is.
Right,
So
I
you
just
don't
thought about
actually
that.
need to do the -1. Okay,
All
so
right.
now let's console log out the teacher's name and the teacher's average. And now we see Mr. Matthews has an 87.5. So let's go confirm that. If we do 75 plus 100, that's 175. 175 divided by 2 is 87.5. Okay, that's cool and all, but now how do we make it work for each school?
Hold on.
We just have to put it like another dot school somewhere in there, like a let school somewhere. I don't know.
Yep, you're on the right track. Where do we put it?
Under the teacher total, maybe.
Well,
Like
if we
in
do
where
it
the-
in the teacher total,
No.
when is this variable going to reset to 0?
No, I meant like where the curly blue brace was.
This one?
Yeah, maybe.
So if we put it in there, it is going to reset to 0 every time we hit a new grade.
It was under that one I was shooting for.
Under here?
Yeah, outside. Yeah, maybe there.
So if we put it here, it's there. If we did let school total equal 0, then if we come up here and say school total plus equals the grade, the computer's going to go through and it's going to say, where's school total? It's not defined until down here.
Oh, okay. So it's gonna go under, it's gonna be by the pink curly brace.
Gonna be in
Well, if we
teacher.
put it
Before
here,
it-
it's now going to reset every teacher. So we don't
Oh.
want it to reset until every school.
Would it be under? Oh, okay.
But now we run into this nasty problem of, well, we have to know how many grades we're keeping track of to divide by, because we can't just look at one array now. We need to divide by, for the elementary school, we need to divide by 4 because it's averaging out 4 grades across this whole school, not just 2. So we need to also keep track of that. So we're also going to say, let school grade count equal 0. And then every time we hit a new grade, we are not only going to add it to the school total, we're also going to bump up the grade count by 1. So now we do the final step. Where do we want to console log out the school's grade? What line number do we want to console log out the school's average?
Under the constant average of the teacher total.
Right here?
Yeah.
Well,
89.
above that. Yeah.
So like here?
Under the pink curly brace.
Or maybe under the brace.
So what we need to do is, let's take a step back here. Maybe go into our HTML comments will help. This is the end of the grade loop. This is and if we put our cursor here, we get that little highlighting trying to tell us where our curly braces are lining up. This is the end of our teacher loop. And this is the end of our school loop. So think about this. what do we want the final output to say?
The average teachers.
And school.
Right.
But the output that we're trying to get to work right now is going to say the school name or the school type and the grade average, right?
Right.
But how many times do we want that to print out?
Once for each school.
Once for each school, which means 3 times. So we're looking at this. We know this loop is certainly not going to run only 3 times because there are 11 different grades stored. And we know we don't want it to be in this loop because there are certainly more than 3 different teachers. So what we want it to do is print out for each school. Well, for each school, that sounds like this loop. So let's see where that curly brace ends. And that's where we're going to stick console.log school.type and the school's total divided by the school's grade count.
So you put it right before where it ends.
Yep, because I do want it to print out for each school, which is where this one ends, but I don't want it to print out for each teacher.
Okay, that's what I was gonna say. If you could you have put it anywhere else, but I understand that.
No, it has to go between this curly brace and this curly brace, because if it happens out here, it's only going to print out once. It's not going to print out for each school. And if I put it in here, it's going to print out for each teacher. So we have to be careful and put it in here because it's going to print out for each school. And to prove it, I'm going to save. I'm going to, okay, I'm not going to do it from there. I'm going to do it from here. I'm going to run my node schools.js. And what I get is it printing out all of the teachers' averages, but then it also prints out, hey, the middle school average is 83. The high school average is 47. Wonder what that high school teacher is teaching. Theoretical programming. Damn it, Ms. Thorne. All right, anyway. So we've got everything printing out by the school. So there is a free code camp exercise called record collection, and you're probably going to have flashbacks to this. It is one of my favorite free code camp exercises because it seems so trivial and it seems so boring. But Karen, how many APIs have you worked with where you have to be able to nest through data and be able to deal with this?
Way more than I can count on my fingers and toes.
So this seems like a really boring exercise, but being able to get this giant blob of data and being able to recognize, hey, when I'm going through this, am I dealing with an object or am I dealing with an array? What happens if I need to loop through the array, or do I not need to loop through the array because all I care about is this one specific part of the data, right? Oftentimes you'll run and get a big blob of data back, and all you do is you care about the first one. You don't care about any of the other things in the array, so you just want to zero index it. But if you forget that first step and start diving into keys, you're going to get all of these errors, cannot read null of undefined, or cannot read property teachers of undefined. And you're like, what do you mean undefined? I can see the data right there. And it's just missing that first step of finding whatever index you want to be working on before you dive into the rest of it. So take it step by step and keep on adding to your console log. Keep on incrementing your way into it to confirm that you're getting the data out that you want. Okay, that is all I have for you guys. If you have any questions on anything while I create the tip calculator homework?
No, pray for me.
Pretty much.
For all of this.
We made it to the end of JavaScript week 1. I am going to create a homework assignment also for filling out the weekly feedback form. So you can take the 5 minutes that I'm giving you back right now and go in and fill out the weekly feedback form that is at the top of the, I'm just going to drop it in Slack. That's going to be quicker. We're going into Zoom chat. And we're going into Slack chat. And we're going to make this a homework assignment as well. But if anyone has questions or has general thoughts on how they're surviving their first week of JavaScript, feel free to share. Otherwise, feel free to get out of here.
There's some nuances that I have to, get accustomed to, but some of the stuff that I know from previous stuff is helping. But I know it's not all the same. So I see like you put like some of the functions in a variable.
Yep, and that's the newer style of doing it. Instead of using the function keyword, storing it in just that variable name is becoming the preferred way. Anything else that you guys are feeling? It's okay to be feeling overwhelmed here. It's okay to be tired and exhausted at the end of the week.
I have a question from some reading I was doing last night. So I was reading some of the Eloquent JavaScript, and they were talking about bindings, and it seemed like bindings and variables were synonymous.
Binding is along the same lines of assignment, right? In that all you're doing is assigning the value into the variable. Binding is a somewhat complicated concept in JavaScript that fortunately has been replaced by arrow functions.
Okay.
Yeah, binding was so complicated that the people who created JavaScript didn't understand how binding was working. And so they said, we need to solve this another way than telling developers it's on them to figure it out.
Okay.
And they created arrow functions, and the whole industry went, oh, that solves the problem a much better way. Let's just use those.
Okay. Thank you.
With that said, if you said, hey, I'm going to create a new variable and bind a value to it, that would just mean I'm just assigning in the value. And then if you made it a let, you could bind a new value to it by just assigning a new one in.
Okay. And does it store the value, or does it point to the address of the value?
It points unless you explicitly write it using like spread syntax, and then it would copy it.
Okay.
But we'll get into that later on.
Okay.
Have a good night. You guys feel free to drop out. I'm just putting the last of the homework in here.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Night.
Night, everyone.
Have a good night, guys.
Good night.
Have a good night.
Night.
See you guys. Unless
Bye.
anyone has questions. Okay.